Good morning and welcome everyone, and I thank you for joining us. This is the second to last webinar on housing. This afternoon will be our final one for a series of 8. And no doubt today will be just as informative as all the others have been. Brenda went through the guidelines, so just keep in mind, mute and also type your questions in the chat box. Question period will be at the end of the day. First of all, I would like to thank our funder, the Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise, for the funding that has allowed us to produce these webinars. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Carl Lafreniére. Carl has been working as a community organizer at FRAPRU since October. Prior to this, he accumulated more than 10 years of experience in community intervention, working with a diverse range of populations, including marginalized youth, individuals experiencing homelessness, First Nations, and Inuits. In addition to his professional experiences, Carl has been actively involved in the student and labor union communities, as well as within the housing cooperative where he resides. So Carl, I thank you for giving us your time. I know this is the season, and I guess all year long you're busy, but right now, this is your even busier time. So we really do appreciate your giving us time. I know that when you're finished with us, you're going to be doing an interview with the media, so that just shows how busy and important the information you have to share with us. So without further ado from me, I'm going to turn it right over to you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Ruth. Hello, everyone. I'll just wait a bit since my PowerPoint will be starting just right now. Okay, so we'll be together for like an hour and a half, and we'll have like a nice break time in between. I'll try my best to speak as great English as I can, since I'm not a native English speaker, and I'll try to not speak so too fast though, because I tend to do that a bit, but I think I'll be fine. Today we'll be covering a bit what is FRAPRU, the Front d'Action Populaire en Réaménagement Urbain. I'll do like a quick history of that organization. I'll talk about their analysis of the last StatScan data, and especially on seniors and individuals with disabilities. I'll talk a bit about housing crisis, the consequences and causes, and we'll finish with our claims at FRAPRU for towards Quebec, Canada's, and cities also. So we can move to the next slide. So for a start, FRAPRU, what's that? So the FRAPRU is a national coalition for the right to housing that was founded in 1978 with a primary focus on social housing. It's also active on issues related to urban planning, the fight against poverty, and the promotion of social rights. You may know the guy on the picture up in the left corner, Mr. François Saillant, worked at FRAPRU for about 38 years. So you probably recognize him as the face maybe of FRAPRU. He's still really involved and write books about the history of the housing movement. And between us, we still call him Mr. FRAPRU. Now it's Véronique Laflamme that is the spokesperson, and she was at Tout le monde en parle last fall, so it's kind of big, and I hope you get the time to look at that interview, because it was really informative. So FRAPRU regroup 30 participating members. That's mostly housing committees, and there's also like 100 associated members. and it's really like a democratic organization. So we have like one annual congress, but we also have 4 annual assemblies, and we're at now we have the chance to have 5 workers that doing like a lot of stuff. All orientation and actions strategies of FRAPRU are determined by the participating members in General Assembly or Congress, and activists are invited to get involved and take part in decision making. In fact, there's a reserve seat at the FRAPRU board for especially for activists. So we really try to put activists in front of our organization, because like without like people on streets and fighting for social housing, FRAPRU could just not exist. I'll move forward. So just real quick about like the FRAPRU histories. As I was saying earlier, it was founded in 1978 to combat a wave of urban redevelopment aimed at embellishment and modernization of popular neighborhoods. Uh, the those modernization result in significant rent increase and displacing of individuals and families living in those popular neighborhoods. Um, just in Montreal, from 1957 to 1974, there was more than 28,000 apartments demolished. A lot of these demolition was to build highways and other modern beauty. From 1981, FRAPRU's member decides that social housing will be their priority, as it is the best way we think to ensure the retention of population in popular neighborhoods and to preserve low-income housing stock. And it was a priority for the next couple of years, but it really becomes the FRAPRU identity from time to time. And we still fight, we still have like a specific aspect for social housing. And yeah. Next slide, please. There's others important moment in FRAPRU histories, because for decades, it was really the federal government that was funding for the social housing. And in the beginning of the 1990s, the federal withdraw the funding for new social housing. So it was like it has a big impact on what FRAPRU does and on social housing across Canada. We calculated that since the federal withdrawal, today those withdraw deprive Quebec for about like 80,000 social housing units. So that's a real big impact on what we're facing now. So after that withdrawal, FRAPRU need to change a bit the target. So they focus more on provincial government to offset the federal disengagement, sorry about that, and succeed in obtaining, because like with that fight, the FRAPRU succeed to get what we know about accès logis. It's one of the greatest wins from the housing movement to get Quebec get involved and create a specific program for social housing. And unfortunately, at the beginning of 2000, housing crisis affect. There was a big housing crisis, and the difference between like the housing crisis that we face now compared to the one at the beginning of the 2000, it's that the last one was just affecting large urban sector, and I'll talk about that later on. But what we see now, it's towards all Quebec that there's a housing crisis. but before that, it was mainly like Montreal and Quebec and those big cities that was really affected. So from sorry, in 2018 there was a big walk from Ottawa to Quebec City to from that FRAPRU organized, and there was a lot of activists participating in that. So that's a big part of our history since like we try to advocate that the federal government need to do more for social housing and also walking towards all Quebec and to Quebec City to say that Quebec also need to do more. In the past few years, we got a new government. Like we already know that that the CAC came in, and even if they say that they're gonna finance the social housing and the backlog from Accès Logis, they unfortunately didn't do much. And 2 years ago, they forsakes Accès Logis for the FAC, the Programme d'habitation abordable Québec. And unfortunately, FAC has for us, FAC has insufficient scale, some exclusionary criteria. They're slow on implementation and they lack of long-term sustainability. We think that FAC is mainly made for the private, but we see that they're not that interested either in those programs. So it's kind of a big problem since like they put those programs in place and all the community organization have harder time to get the housing that we need, and even the private part where there should be there, because like that's the plan of the CAC, private a bit more, but they don't even dare to show up and to put money on the plate. So in the past few years, there was less social housing than the decades before and the decades before. So that's kind of a big problem since, as we know, we're facing a housing crisis, and in the meantime, government do less and way less than before. Next slide, please. So for the next part, I'll be talking about our dossier noir. It's an analysis of the last Statistic Canada data. The 8th edition covered the last Stats Can data that was from 2021. Unfortunately, because like those data take time. So like we published that on the September 2023, but like it's a bit old, but it's still really important. And I also had some new numbers that we got from we got from last October. So there's like old numbers and some fresh one, and I'll try to explain that later on. So for the 2021 stats, we know that there's a sorry there's one for 4 tenants also that allocated more than 30% of their incomes for rents, and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation say that also that allocate more than 30% of their incomes to housing are likely to experience difficulties related to housing affordability. So why we always talk about 30% of their income for rents, it's like a threshold for CMHC, so the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. I need to put an important warning on the 2021 stats, because I don't know if everybody remember what was happening back then, but there was COVID, so there was a big Canadian emergency response benefits that a lot of Canadians received, and others like government financial help that for sure boosted the East income for Canadians. But it's like, as we know, it's not something that's come each and every year. So we need to keep in mind that it's the reality. It's unfortunately way harder than that, since like Canadians don't receive those help each and every years, and we know for a fact there that. In 2022, there's a lot of Canadians that unfortunately were forced to pay back Canada because they don't receive those help. They didn't have the right to have those help, so they pay back. But it's still calculated in the 2021 stats. In Quebec, there's nearly 50,000 tenants that spend 80% of their income on rents. So that's definitely big number when when we understand that when you pay that much of your income in rent, there's nothing more to pay for, like for your health, for heating, and even like for socializations. Um, Between the 2020 and 2021, the average rent has increased by almost 9%. That was a record in 20 years, with a total increase of 25% since 2018. Uh, yeah, and the vacancy rate for rental properties decreased from 2.2 to 1.7 in just 1 year in Quebec. And they say that a market, sorry, is in equilibrium, which means there's a power balance between tenants and landlord when the vacancy rate is around 3%. So as what we see right now is definitely a shortage in all things. And it's, as I was saying earlier, it's affecting like each and every part of Quebec and even in Canada, as you probably know, because they talk a lot about that in the news right now. Um, and it's important to know that even if we say that the vacancy rate is under 2%, it's even worse depending on the type of apartment, because like there's a even bigger shortage for bigger apartment for families, for example. But we also saw that there's a big shortage depending on the rent, the amount of the rent. So there's way more like it's expensive rents, but there's not much rent that like regular people can pay, unfortunately. Um, and it's affecting way more different populations. We know that it's affecting like the youngest way more. It's affecting like people living alone. Also, and as I was saying earlier, there's not much of big apartments, so the shortage for people that have like children, it's pretty awful, and it's forcing people to live in apartment that don't represent their needs. So there's a lot of folks right now that are in apartment that are too small for their needs, and they're forced to live with cockroach, for example, because like they know for a fact that they can not even move out because there's not apartment available for them for that they can pay, unfortunately. I want to take time because we're with ACQ to talk about a bit about how housing crisis is affecting seniors because many seniors for sure are retired and household age 65 and over are tenants who benefit the least from the government transfer, the CRB that I was talking earlier. So like even if like as I was saying in 2021, there's a lot of folks that receive more money and uh, was capable of paying maybe a bit more for housing. That was not the case for a big part of seniors in Canada, and because they receive pensions. Um, Many, yeah, sorry. Yeah, and the the seniors represent the age group with the slowest income growth between the two census. And 2021, they constitute the poorest group with a median annual income of 34,000 mostly each years. So like with the rent increase and with the price of renting right now, there's not much to pay for nothing less than like just living in a small and not a good apartment. And the fact that there's not much accessibility also, even in private seniors residence, it's big problems because not just for because I will talk later on about individual with disabilities, but we also need to know that seniors need to have like housing that they could stay. We talk a lot about right now about like the fact that seniors wish to stay at home longer and that they wish to have the health to came to them. But if we don't offer and if we don't build housing that can accommodate seniors that getting older and that getting like less less capacities, we're a bit in a big problem. The fact that there's not much accessibility, as I was saying, even in the private seniors' residence, could be responsible for a lot of falling of seniors. And just for a fact, there's in Canada 15 deaths a day, much or less, from falling. Uh, about individual with disabilities. They have the right to have their apartment renovate to their needs, but it's complicated a lot. There's a lot of paper, and it could take almost 2 years. So they're forced to live in an apartment that is not totally accessible to their needs. And it's also like a type of population that are the poorly and they didn't receive like any more income. Um, and we can also deduct, as I was saying, about like the fact that they have the right to have their apartment renovated to their needs. We can deduct that landlords are definitely less willing to accommodate in those housing crises because unfortunately they have like the choice to choose like someone for example that don't have those disabilities and they that don't need renovate their apartments. Uh, so I must say that that's another fact that we need more social housing and less private one. I'll take the time also to talk about a bit the about Execo, organization that fight for the right of individual with disabilities, because they call for a universal design, and I think it's important to talk a bit about that. So universal design is the fact that we should build new housing with higher accessibility standard because population is getting older and it's way cheaper to build those new housing in a way that they're accessible than to renovate after that. For a fact, it's just 1% higher on construction cost to build accessibly housing, and it's for sure cost way more if you just renovate afterwards, because like it's not built. For example, like they often put the heater just be below the door, for example. So like that's a big renovation when you need to change that so the chairs could pass. Um, Oh yeah, and I'll get back a bit about the seniors, but we saw lately that overbidding caused private seniors resident to close, sorry, in search of higher profits. So you probably heard about Mont Carmel and others. Unfortunately, there's people that when they saw that there was a housing crisis and a housing shortage, they take that advantage to make more profits. And so an example of that is the fact that private seniors residence uh, gets get bought and changed to normal housing and put a lot of seniors on streets. We also know for a fact that seniors could be more affected by the housing crisis because moving could be a lot of stress when you're in the same apartment for decades and you have all your landmark around you. You know your neighborhood, like the bakery across the streets and stuff like that. And for sure, like just the fact that they cannot like move a fridge as easy as I can. It's also an important uh, fact about like how housing crisis, I think, affect more seniors and also individuals with disabilities. Uh, as I was thinking, I speak a bit too fast, so we should be able to take the break a little bit earlier than planned.
Would you like to do that now, Carl?
That was the plan, but
Sure. Yeah,
if you prefer, I can continue a bit more. It's up to you.
I'm just trying to, well, it's 11 o'clock. We've been at it about 30 minutes. Maybe we can go maybe another 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'll
Would
try
that work?
to make more examples and speak a bit.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And also just to remind, while we have this little break, please get those questions into the chat box so that when we come back and we're near the end, we can be ready for Katya to ask the questions. So go ahead, Carl. We'll continue for another 10, 15 minutes. When you're ready to take a break, let me know.
Perfect. Okay, so I think I've said what I had to about seniors and individuals with disabilities, so we can move to the others. Thanks. So as I was saying earlier, there's right now a big housing crisis, and what's a big difference from the housing crisis right now from the one that we faced in the beginning of the 2000s is the fact that now everywhere in Quebec there's a housing shortage and there's a lot of rent increase also. Uh, the factors of that are real estate speculation that lead to eviction that escalate the rent cost, and there's an erosions of affordable rental housing, and there's more visible homelessness. And we know, and I know because I work with them, that when we acknowledge an increase of of visible homeless, there's probably like way more invisible that we don't see. People that live on the couch of somebody else and stuff like that. And what's really different also, it's like there's now homelessness across all regions, and that's contribute also to the crisis and exacerbates the situations. Um, uh, the about the housing shortage, that's interesting because I've got the new numbers from last October, so that's pretty fresh. Different from the 2021 stats that I was talking earlier. So the vacancy rates has decreased from 1.7 to 1.3. So that's the rate across Quebec. And if you remember what I was saying earlier, the target is supposed to be 3%. So we're like getting down a hill super fast, unfortunately. And that's brand new number. And as you may see, there's even a bigger shortage on in other places than the big cities. Like in Montreal, it's 1.5, but in Quebec, for example, it's 0.9. So and like that's a big problem because those regions away from the big cities have less community organization, have less like organization that can support the fact that the people's getting like poorer and poorer, and they there are more tenants that was living in the same apartment for years and years. And so we receive at FRAPRU and in different tenants committee a lot of calls from all across Quebec, and people are living in fear. Um, just for remember, in 2022, the vacancy rate was 2.5. So it's really going down pretty fast each and every year. We see the housing shortage getting like harder and harder. Um, Yeah, and for rural tenants, they're often more poor than in big cities. So that's really something that we need to think when we see that there's a shortage all across Quebec, and and yeah. Sorry, I'll just take a quick sip and get back to you. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. So as I was saying, there's a housing shortage, but there's also an affordability crisis. The soaring rents are real. The average rents increase from 700 in the fall of 2018 to 1,022 in 2023. We pass historic short historic soaring rents, since like it's the first time that in 2023 the number from the fall 2023, as I was talking earlier, it's the first time that we see that the average rent all across all across Quebec go higher than 1,000. So that's a big gap. And and for example, in Shawinigan, there was a 12 percentage increase just in 1 year. And in Quebec in general, it was 7.4, but on those like more rural part, it was like way greater than that. And and as the CMHC said, the rent increase have outpaced both inflation and wage growth. And because I'm with you, I must say that it's outpaced by a lot the increase of the pension, for example. And for 2023, the average rent in Montreal is 1,071, but the average available rent in Montreal it's almost 200 more. So we like when we talk about average rent, it even if it's higher than it's supposed to be, it's even harder for like people that wish to change apartment because like those available rents are way uh, higher than those that you live in, and that's also like a big problem since like there's a lot of folks that live in place that's too expensive or like too small and things like that, and they can't even like change place for a more suitable place because unfortunately if they move from where they live they're gonna be paying like way more, and they're already like struggling to pay the rent and to put food on the table and stuff like that. Um, since I'm talking about like putting food on the table and the poverty, I must underline that uh, the housing crisis affect also affects children's and family because there's a statistic that prove that those children facing problems with homes that don't respect the needs are facing a lot of stress, and that's affect their result in school, for example, and that could like lead to some mental problem. Sorry. Um, it's big. It's a bit hot, but I think it could be a good place to put a break.
Carl, do you have much more to present?
Uh, you wish that maybe I go ahead and
Well, I
we don't
don't
take a break?
know. I put it out to you. If you would like to just keep going, we do the question period, and then people can leave a bit early. And we do have another one back at 1:30, but it's entirely up to you. Do you need to take a break for your voice?
No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine.
You're okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so if
But
you're good with this, we'll just flow. Tell me when you're finished, and then I'll put it over to Katia for the questions.
okay. So sorry about that. You're stuck with me. Okay. Let's move to the next slide, please. So there's unaffordabilities that disproportionately affects low incomes households. There's almost 400,000 tenants that with a median annual income of less than 24,000 and that paying more than 50% of their income for rents. And for example, I put you the maximum monthly pension and the average monthly pensions to show how if we take back a bit that the fact that the average rent in Montreal are $1,000, if you're a seniors living with let's say average monthly pensions, there's probably a problem since like you cannot afford any housing, any private housing at least in Montreal, for example. But it's the same fact for all across Quebec and unfortunately all across Canada. Uh, we talk a lot about housing crisis, but it's important to remember that low-income households are way more affected and should be prioritized by the in government actions because they they often think that they only need to build more and build more and build more, but in the past few years they just build like expensive housing that nobody at least nobody from a popular household can pay. So that's a big problem, and we think that the government action need to be more focused on the real needs of the the people that's more affected by those housing crises. So for sure, the low income household should be prioritized by the government actions. uh, I'll move forward. So we talk a lot about, and I think I explained myself about how that I prove that there's a housing shortage and there's a definitely a housing crisis. But what's the consequence on the population? It's hard to talk about consequences, but because uh, there's a lot of those consequences that can also be the cause. So it's a bit like in between. But this there's a rise of discriminations since owners can afford to choose tenants in context of housing shortage. We know there are more discrimination regarding gender, age, origins, economic situations, but also families. There's a lot of landlords that just don't accept any tenants that live with a child because they're often like because we know child can uh, can be loud, for example. And there's also a big raise on evictions. The other organization, the Regroupement of Housing Committees and Tenant Association of Quebec, the RECLAG, revealed more than 100% increase in forced eviction that was reported to housing committees and tenants associations in 2023 compared to 2022. So just in 1 year, there was like way more forced eviction in the province. We are talking about like more than 3,000 cases according to the annual reports. And and often those cases don't even go to the tribunal because unfortunately uh, those tenants know that the tribunal is not often on their sides, so they often like uh, accept the evictions, and the those landlord that wish to make more profits offer like some money that could be uh, attractive to those poor tenants, but they they try to find a new space, a new apartment, and in less than 1 year, they already have spent the money that the landlord give to for the eviction in the rent increase that they face when they change housing. And for fact, for about the consequences of the housing crisis, there's a big rising of homelessness. According to the census of people experiencing homelessness, there has been an increase of 44% since 2018. That was the last time that they do the census on the people on the homelessness. So they calculated around 10,000 people living on streets in Quebec. But I must say that for an organization that work with homeless, that there's significant criticisms of the census. So we can assume that it's much more than that. Because I was saying earlier, there's people that don't have a house, and but they're not calculated in those census because they live like in the couch of the friends or and and a lot of female that that forced to to live with violence husbands or friends, because if not they will be on streets. um there's also a big rise of housing costs. So right now the youngest population cannot like dream about getting a house, because like you need to have like really important income to be able to pay just a small house near Montreal, for example. Um, there's a big financialization of housings. Uh, the those landlord that wish to make more profits, they find a way to put the tenants that pay less and then the market away, so that they can raise the rent. Next slide. So there's a bit there's a big problem we think right now, because as I was saying earlier, here at FRAPRU, we advocate for social housing, but government talk way more about affordable housing, and it's hard to understand like the difference between social housing and affordable housing. And we need to talk about that, because they talk a lot, and they talk in a way that it seems the same things, but it's really different, because what's important in social housing, it's off markets, so it's non-profit, it's collective ownerships, the tenants have control over their housing conditions. They targeted towards low and moderate income household. And when we talk about social housing, it's a cooperative of habitations. There's also non-profits housings and public housing. But I think you already got a presentation about like those social housing, so I won't be taking a lot of time about that, but it's important to remember that. About affordable housing, as I was saying earlier, government talk about a lot, even like uh, Canada, Quebec, and municipalities. The new words. It's affordable housing. And affordability is not the same for everyone. The target for affordabilities in Canada are from the Canada government is different from the Quebec government, and could be different from for example, the definition that Montreal put on affordable housing. So it's really a flexible term with no common definitions. It's typically considered over a specific time, sometimes as short as 10 years. So for example, they will say that for 10 years the housing that you build need to be like under the market. But what happened after 10 years? Probably like there's going to be like a big raise, and it's totally legal for the private that build and receive money from the government to build affordable housing after 10 years to just like raise the rent. But also it's there's a gray zone, like you're for example you receive some help from the government to build affordable housing, and you need to keep it for 10 years, for example. But after like 2 years, what happens if you sell the housing to another private? It's unclear if the new buyer have the same obligation about like affordabilities. The affordability models may be private and for profits. So we think it's a big scare for the futures, because like we don't keep those housing for the communities. It's depending on the market, so we can be scared about like what could happen in let's say 20 years. And those affordable housing was made by the CAC and the Canada governments to attract the privates, to attract those private constructors to get some funding to build more and build more. But what we see in the past years, it's like there's not much interest about those private sectors to build with like specific terms. Um, yeah, that's it. So next slide, please. So for us, it's important to understand that addressing the housing crisis does not simply involve an increase in supply, because rents in new buildings uh, are higher than the overall market, and that it's pushing the price up, even for the neighborhoods. There's private rental units that built in recent years do not match the tenant's ability to pay. They're expensive, and in the lease there's the F sections that allow the landlord of a new building a rent increase that's not subject to the scale set by the tribunal. For a 5 year, that means that for a 5 year person, they can increase the rents as they wish, as like and that's definitely have a big impact on the markets. Uh, yeah, and as I was saying, it's affect all the surroundings, because like uh, they when they bought a building with lease, they calculate like how much is the rents and the surroundings, and that's a way to define how much building uh, will cost, for example. And so it's important to understand that, because like the the Canada governments and the Quebec governments often say that we need to build more, we need to do more housing and faster, and regarding of the price, and regarding of like for example the law or the urbanization, or the we need more housing faster, and like they think that the market will just adjust themselves. Uh, but they we we know that right wing tends to think that the magic hand will control everything, and like when you put more expensive housing, it's lower the price of those, because like it's a lot of cause and effects, but it's not simpler. It's not simple as that. And even for example in Montreal, in 2021 there was a lot of constructions. It was a year that that pushed the market. There was like a lot of a new building built in Montreal in 2021, but in the same years the rent increase uh, was like higher than before, and so that's a proof that it's not simple as you build new house and the market is like gonna be stabilized. So let's talk a bit about how the government responds to the housing crisis, and with some nice pictures of Lego eating tomatoes. So what government do? As I was saying earlier, they abolish axiology and they put the FAC, the programme Québec Affordable Housing Program, that replaced axiology, but it's less effective, harder for organizations to obtain funding for the social housing. Sorry. So for us, FAC is a disaster for individual, for example, for individual with disabilities, since there's no more specific funding to build accessible housing that was before with axiology, and they reduce the norm for corridors. When we were on axiology, corridors need to be 1.5 meters, and now the norm on the FAC is only 900 centimeters. So it's too small for chairs to pass. Oh yeah, I wish to talk a bit about because we need to talk about like at least some good laws. So I don't know if you know, but there's a law that we call Françoise David that protects some seniors. So if you're a senior and you live for 10 years in the same apartments, and you're under some and you're, let's say you're poor, to speak easily, uh, the landlord don't have the right to evict you from your house. But I must say that when they were talking about Bill 31, that I will talk later on, the Québec solidaire tried to lower the target from Françoise David law. So they say that because for now it's you need to be 75 years or holders, and they wish to push that down to 70 years old, and the CAC refused that. So the Bill 31 passed without like even protecting the elders. So Bill 31, because as you may know, yesterday was a dark day for the housing in Quebec. So what the Bill 31 changed is that landlord now have the right to refuse lease transfer. Lease transfer was a way to keep the housing lower than the market, because we know for a fact that when a tenants leave their place for a new house, landlord tends to higher the rent even higher than they should, and what the law permit them, and it's really complicated for landlord to go to the tribunal to say that my new landlord I put the put the rent higher than they should, because you need to prove the lease was the amount of the lease before you, and you often don't have that because we unfortunately don't have a way to know what each and every one pay for rent. Yeah, so because what the Bill 31 changed is earlier the landlord were forced to accept the lease transfers. What they will do now is that they can refuse a lease transfer. So the actual tenants will have the rights to quit the apartment, but the new tenants that could came and pay less won't be able to do that. So as I was saying earlier, the landlord will because unfortunately we know will put the rent higher than before. There's some that we should say that that's a good thing for Bill 31, like they put an obligation for the landlord to fill the clause F. The clause F is exactly what I was talking earlier. Like you put the rent, the amount of the rent paid by the last person when you fill the lease. So there's now, since the Bill 31, an obligation for the landlord to fill the clause F. But it's not doing much since the tenants need to prove that the landlord act in bad faith when they didn't fill the clause. So like, because earlier that was an obligation, that was already an obligation, but now they put like the they put and I would say
Et en
like
français, c'est mieux.
une amende.
A
Oui.
fine, a fine.
Yeah, thanks. So
You're
now they put a
welcome.
fine. When you're a landlord and you don't fill the clause F, you prove guilty at the tribunal, you will need to pay a fine. But as I was saying, the tenants need to go to the tribunal to the new landlord, so that didn't start well a new relation for sure. And also they need to prove that the landlord act in bad faith when they didn't fill the clause F. And there's also some a danger in Bill 31 that like nobody talked about. The fact that habitation society could sell land to move public housing. So yeah. So they can, for example, sell HLM to move to other place. They're forced to at least build, like construct a new one or like moving out. But we're a bit scared that it's gonna be like moving because there's a lot of H&M that's been built on in neighborhood that now cost way higher. So we're scared that they're gonna be like selling those to build like farther from, like, for example, from metro, from groceries and stuff like that. So that's what Quebec is doing for the housing crisis. And if we go like a couple of years ago, even like François Legault was not recognizing any housing crisis in Quebec and was saying some stupid stuff like rent could for François Legault 2 years ago. Rent in Montreal cost 500 a month, if you could remember. For sorry, I need to talk a bit about Canada. Now for Quebec now they're a bit forced to recognize that we're in an housing crisis, but I must say that it's coming from a public from activists that push pressure on government. It's not because they're willing to. About Canada, Canada adopt a national housing strategy, and but we don't think that that strategy is doing enough. It's good to see that after those years of Canada not doing much for housing, they're willing to do a bit more, but it's still for us a slow start, and we're really wishing and calling for more. During COVID, there was a rapid housing initiative, and that's interesting to think because they often say that building housing, especially for social housing, it's complicated, it takes times, and they wish that it's going faster. But what we saw is like when you put the money, because in rapid housing initiatives, uh, Canada put more money, more percentage money for the housing. And hey, surprise, in like 1 year or two, there was like a building rising and like for for specific population, and that's way good and it's important. It's a lot of housing for homeless people that was built from the rapid housing initiative, and that's good, but it's a way to saw that if they have the willing to, we can build faster than for now. It just need more funding. That's easy as that. So Fernand, now I may move. So FRAPRU is calling Quebec to for sure adequately funds a complete and sustainable social housing program. Uh, if they wish to keep calling it the fact, actually, we don't really mind, but it needs to be that all the funds need to be on social housing and not just those affordable housing that we as we saw don't help and don't uh, get the housing that we need for the low income population. And we call for 5,000 new social housing in different in various forms, in the three forms that I was talking earlier, over 5 years, and in the goal to double the number of the social housing in Quebec. We also advocate for rent control, including a public rent registry. The rent registry could really help those tenants that sign the lease with higher rent than before, because when they go to the tribunal, they can easily access like the amount was paid by the last tenants. So it could really help the reality of tenants here and right now, and it's not that hard to do because in Montreal, and I think now in Toronto, there's a form of a registry that was put online. It's for now it's just like tenants that just put price on the internet, and you can consult that, but it's not on the tribunal. They cannot recognize that because like anybody can put any amounts. And unfortunately, we saw on Facebook that landlords shared tactics to go to those rent registry and to lower the rent that the tenants paid to to be protected from others like tribunal. So yeah, the public rent registry could be a good way to at least help the tenants that live in private housing. we also need stronger protection against evictions. We think that we can put how do you call a moratoire?
Moratorium?
Moratory, yes. Same.
Simple as that. A moratorium on eviction for let's say you wish to renovate the building to put to get a bigger apartments. So we think that that's not a priorities, and for now, like we need to stop like landlord that push away, for example, tenants to change 4.5 into 6.5 with the second floor. That's make no sense in the housing crisis that we live right now. So we say like since the housing shortage it's lower than 3% in Quebec, we should not allow those type of evictions. Our claims for Canada on next slides. We claims that all funds from the National Housing Strategy to be reserved for social housing because that should be a priority. We there across Canada there are some groups that are calling for 500,000 social units in 10 years, and for sure we put a stamp on that, and we think that Canada should commit to permanently continue providing subsidies to low-income tenants because when they stop the funding on social housing, they take back also the subsidies for low-income tenants, and that's make no sense for us. About cities, it's true that we understand that the city cannot do more if there is not like a provincial and federal government supporting them, because particularly for like smaller cities, they don't have like the fund to build or like to reserve a lot of lands, but there's still some politics that could help and could be done so the cities could have a good impact on the housing crisis. For example, they should have social housing acquisition funds. So when a land is put on sale, they could buy that and they could buy that and sell to a community organization, for example. They should put inclusion regulation so that we can make sure that when you build a new housing, you think about the different variety of population and not just like those expensive condos. They should be more active on their preemptive right to buy housings and to make sure that there's at least some of the housing that goes on market that not going directly to the private part. And they should be able to have ambitious development goal, especially for like Montreal and Quebec, because they're way richer and they have like way more money than the smaller cities, and they should transfer municipal lands to some community organization that can put some nice social housing in different part of the cities. And why not zoning designated especially for social housing? Cities have the right to say that, hey, you know what? There's way too much of like, for example, condos like of specific buildings. So that that building's gonna be social housing or nothing less. That's that's gonna about like what we claim for. Now I don't know if you saw maybe on metro or in bus, but we have a nice campaign that's calling next slide please. That's calling La clé c'est le logement social. So the key is social housing because we really advocate for the fact that we need more of social housing. So there's like those one, but way bigger in metros and everywhere in different part. There's couples in Quebec cities and every part in Quebec. So we request that the Quebec government, to make a priority. So I take some time to ask you to click on the link or scan the QR codes to send with just a few clicks. You can send an email to Ms. Duranceau and Mr. Legault. And you can also like and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that. And that's it for me.
Carl, thank you ever so much. You've given us a wealth of information and things to think about. And you've also given us some opportunity where we can make a voice known by clicking on the site. I'm sorry. I was thinking as we were going along, oh, I should have given them the break because I'm sure you're exhausted from talking. And I know that there's been a number of questions that have come in. Hopefully
I'm glad that people find it interesting and they wish to know more.
Yes, now we have about 10 minutes for the complete question and for me to wrap up. So Katya, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okie dokes. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do this, but I will figure it out as we go. Cal, the first question I'm going to ask is, what are the major solutions to address the shortages as we know in housing?
Because there's like the government response to like to reduce the laws and to be like to facilitate it more housing like with less regulations, but we don't advocate for that because like as we can see for example in Griffintown, if you build fast and you don't think further ado, you're gonna be like building neighborhoods that nobody want to live in because like there's no, for example, groceries, public space and stuff like that. So we think it's a bit of a fear that if they stop the regulations about like housing, we're gonna have like Griffintown everywhere in Canada. But for us, it's clear that what needs to be built is social housing because like yes, it's gonna be helping like the tenants that are the poorest, but also that's gonna be like cause a vacancy of apartments that's often like less in price than new buildings.
Okay. I'm going to take 3 questions and merge them into one. Hopefully you can answer. So there was a question that came in about to what extent is population growth plays a role in available housing and housing shortage. And I'm going to piggy that back. No, actually, I'm going to start with that. Go for it.
Okay. Okay.
So, so population growth.
Yeah.
So as populations are growing, could that be playing, or could it, and how is it playing an impact on the housing shortage?
It's
Or
It's for sure
affordable
true.
housing? We'll keep it simple, affordable housing.
Yeah, that it could be true that the fact that the population growth have an impact on housing, but we think that it's something that we know that's gonna happen. So it's kind of crazy that now the government are waking up and say
Mhm.
that, oh, we need to build more, and there's not house for everybody, because like as I was saying earlier, like FRAPRU and other organization exist for like almost 50 years, and like we advocate for more housing like since the beginning, and like we make like publications like almost each and every month asking for more building so yeah, that's a fact that the growth of population have an impact on the shortage, but it should not be a surprise for anybody. I know it's not like answer to the questions, but
No, but it segue into this question that this is when I'm gonna put three in one.
yeah.
So you said in the presentation that the senior median income is 34,400. The average rent in Montreal is about 1,071. We know that the average pension for a senior is $758.32. So with a shortage of housing or affordable housing or social housing, could one of the solutions be converting empty office spaces, and you can use those for social housing or just affordable housing or social housing for seniors?
Yeah, well, like there we know that there's a couple of like empty office, but
Mm.
and it definitely could be a solution. I know that for example Montreal is like looking into that, but I think that in the past few like years or months they're a bit struggling, because like those there's a lot of workers getting back into those offices, so it's less of an opportunity that we were thinking earlier on. So it's yeah, it's definitely it could be a good start, but unfortunately, it won't be putting a lot of housing into the markets,
Mhm.
and it's costing kind of a big part of the money to renovate those office for housing, because like they don't have a kitchen, and there's like some renovations that cost a lot. And the problem is it's also that the people that control that own those office wish to get back their money. So like
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to put, but yeah, it's definitely could be a solutions, but it definitely not going to be a situation where we can put all our eggs in the same baskets.
Okay. I'm just gonna call it. I think we're gonna need 5 more minutes because there's no way I can cram all the questions. So I'm giving everyone a heads up. Because Cal, based on what you just said, and based on what you said in the presentation, that because of the lack of accessible or adaptable housing for seniors or people with mobility issues or disabilities, they're then, I don't know if forced is too strong a word, but they have to stay in long-term care facilities or private senior residences. Can you just maybe talk just a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was very interesting. And as we're talking about gaps and shortages in housing, I think that's an important item to maybe delve into a bit more.
Yeah, because but I think there's like two sides of that, because there's the fact that that seniors wish to stay longer in their house, because it's a place where they feel safe, and it's definitely a good thing, and it's has good impact on their health, and it's also have a good impact on the economic health of the government, because it's costing like way less to offer services to those seniors in their home than to put their in facilities care. But the problem, and I think when we think about universal design, could be a good way to change that fact in the futures. But the problem is like there is no accommodation. There's not a lot of housing, even in those residents. They, for example, they often like they often have like a bath and no shower. But we know that for elders, it's way safer to have a shower than a bath. And I'm not sure I'm going to the right place.
No, you're good. I was
Okay.
like, I'm gonna stop you there, but c'est beau, c'est beau, mais je vais t'arrêter. I
That's
just
fine.
wanted to touch back on what you started off the webinar with, that you were saying between 1991 and 1994, the federal government kind of reduced funding in housing, and then from 91 to 2000, the provincial government picked it up. And then they started the Accès Logis program. And then in 22-23, they scrapped that program and they switched it to the FAC, which is the Programme d'Habitation Abordable Québec. So you talked about the Accès Logis, but can you just describe the differences between the two programs now that one's been eliminated and we have a new one? So what are the differences between the FAC and the Accès Logis?
Yeah, I've got the English name somewhere. Yeah, so the Quebec Affordable Housing Program that replaced Accès Logis. The problem is like when they put a new program, it takes like years to people to get acclimated to, and to know how it works, and how to like submit some housing, for example. And that was also the fact at the beginning of Accès Logis, but organizations are like used to Accès Logis for years. So like it's like we're coming back to understanding, and unfortunately they don't build that with no flaws. Like there's problem, and they like building the plane as it fly. So that's definitely a big problem, and it seems like it seems really hard to change that on the same time as we have like a big housing crisis. But there's also like a difference that cannot be being changed since like Accès Logis was really oriented for a community organization that was willing to build social housing. And now the fact, even if those organizations still can apply, it's a little bit more oriented for the private to put some housing on the market. Like they say faster, but it's not even that fast. And there's like there's less there's more problem for the community, and it's we don't know like how much housing we can ask each time, and it's longer, and it's I was sorry about that.
Non, dis-le en français si tu veux.
No, it's the problem is not the language. It's I lost in my in my
Your
thinking.
train of thought. Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, sorry. So the problem is also that the program is way less predictable. That's
Okay.
what I think. It's way less predictable, and like each and every time they open the program, you need to apply. But if you're not selected, you're not going to be like you need to apply again in the other opening. So that's complicated, and they don't allow money for the planning of the project.
Okay.
So like the community need to like advance the money, even if they don't know if they will receive the funding from the FAP. So that's a big problem.
Yeah, it is. I may have missed one question, but it's 12:02 and I feel bad because Carl, you've been talking since 10:30, so you must be exhausted. So I think I'll end it there, and apologies if I missed any questions, but I tried to squeeze everything as concretely as I could.
I put my mail on the chat if like if you can write me.
Super,
Okay,
merci.
thank you, Katia. Thanks, Carl, ever so much. I'm sure you're absolutely exhausted. I appreciate you giving us so much time, and I apologize that you didn't get a break. But
No worries. I think
I know you do.
I think it's a better idea. I didn't take a break because if not, I won't be able to finish at that time.
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't realize there, yeah, but that's fine. We made it and we're in good time. So I really appreciate you doing this for us. Just to remind everybody that you will, in approximately a week's time, receive a link to enable you to go to our website or our YouTube channel to view the recording, and you will also get a copy of Carl's presentation. As he said, in the chat box is his email. If you've got something urgent that you wish to ask him about, keep it to the point because he is a busy man. And we will be back for those who are attending the last session this afternoon with our panel. And we ask that you be ready at 1:25 and we'll let you in at 1:30 sharp. And thank everybody so much for sticking with us. I know a few did put a message in that they had to leave because they had another meeting. Carl, all the best. Keep us posted on what's happening with FRAPRU. And if there's anything we can do to help, we can share it with our networks. So I wish everybody a good lunch break, and we'll see some of you back at 1:30, and the team will be back at 1. Thanks.
Thanks for the invite. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.